Welcome back to another episode of The Political Life. Today, we are coming to you from Washington, D.C. with our regular Washington, D expert, Rich Gold of Holland Knight. He's the practice group leader there, constantly in the top 5 lobbying firms. Do I have that right, Rich?
Whatever you say, Jim.
Number 3, what were you?
3.
Pretty amazing. Anyways, and Rich, I think you were pretty much started the group or took it over soon after it started and have, brought it to where it is today. Quite impressive. But anyways, that is not why people tune in. People tune in to find out what is going on in Washington, D.C. And things are starting to get busy down there. And now, so what, why don't we start with the debt limit, if that's okay with you? What is going on with the debt limit, Rich, and what are your thoughts?
Well, you're all fun and games today, aren't you?
Yeah, let's just right into this is exciting stuff. We're going to talk about the debt limit. And actually, when we're recording this, it is Thursday night, Thursday late afternoon, and I just read that the speaker is planning on being heading up to Wall Street for Monday to let the Wall Street executives know that he is ready, willing, and able to have a conversation with the White House, but he hasn't heard from the White House. So, Rich, he is giving the impression that the ball is in the White House's side of the court. The White House doesn't seem that. I think is probably going to say that he needs to go first. So, what is going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think the White House is taking the position, the age-old Lao Tse position: never stand in the midst of your enemy when he's in the midst of self-destruction. The Republicans have put themselves in a box on the debt limit issue. They are looking for significant budget cuts, which are not attainable in the context of a debt limit deal. They do have a proposal out on the street this week that would take funding levels for the coming year, FY24, back to FY22 levels, which would be a significant across-the-board cut in domestic discretionary spending, given we've put in Social Security and Medicare and the other mandatory programs, if everybody's decided to protect, and nobody wants to cut defense. So we're in the same discussion we always have. If you feel like you've heard this discussion before, you have. And it always ends the same way, which is the president wins these debates because he's going to sign what he's going to sign, and he's not going to sign what he's not going to sign. Typically where we end up, if you look at the Obama-Boehner deal from whatever that was, 2014, 2015, we will do caps on domestic discretionary spending for a few years to bring spending down, and kind of tighten the reins a little bit. But that's about the most you're going to get out of this. I do believe this time there's an added sweetener, both for Republicans and for the administration, in that there seems to be a reasonable amount of energy around getting some kind of deal on permitting reform, which would, allow renewable energy projects and oil and gas projects to move forward more expeditiously through the environmental review process. And there's some talk about putting that on the back of the debt limit as an incentive for Republicans as well. But, we keep saying Republicans, and really there are two very different camps here, the House and Senate Republicans. And Senate Republicans seem totally open to a more conventional deal, as I just described it. House Republicans very much want significant cuts. And so I think the Senate is in the same position the White House is in. They're just waiting for somebody to make a move here. So we'll see what happens when they get back next week. But, it's going to be the third week in April. By the time we get to the fourth week in May, we are in the red zone, if you will, to use the football analogy at that point. And, it's going to be time to start moving legislation. So it'll be very interesting to see sort of how this all goes over the next work session or two.
How big is the group of House Republicans that want significant cuts as part of this deal?
I mean, I think they kind of, look, there's not a big legislative agenda here for House Republicans, right? Like in terms of things that may become law. They have permitting reform they want to do. They have the debt limit. There are a handful of other items, but it's not like when they all stand for re-election in 2024, we expect significant legislation to have passed like anything that happened in the last Congress. So they are somewhat beholden to A, getting a deal here, and B, being able to say they got something important done. The question is, a lot of these members, this freshman class, are a lot of members who haven't served in political office before. They're not, the traditional pipeline of former state legislators or county commissioners or whatever. We have a lot of folks who are, sort of expert in, current ground politics, but not necessarily in Washington policymaking. And that's really the challenge for the House Republican caucus right now is can they pull together and come up with a budget deal that they can all agree to, because they've got a 4-vote margin. So there's not a lot of room for error here, and they're certainly not going to get Democratic support, which I think is what you're seeing. The Democrats are not going to come rescue them on this.
Right. And boy, the margin is small. The debt limit debate is a little bit like Groundhog Day. Now, there are different variations of it. And it could be based on that contingency you just talked about. This debate could be unique. It may very well end the same, but the process may be a little bit more intense or unique because of the dynamics.
Yeah, for sure. And, look, I think in the 2020 presidential election, basically what people were looking for was steadiness and competence. If you looked at the focus grouping from that I saw on the election, both voters coming out of the booth and what pollsters were saying beforehand, people were just tired of the swirling. It had been a tough time with COVID and then sort of all of the dramatics around, the constant back and forth with the Trump administration. And, people aren't terribly happy, according to polling data, with where the Biden administration is right now. But I do think there's somewhat of a sense of calm, not the same churn. And so Republicans risk stirring up those old feelings again, if we're really going to play Thelma versus Louise, with the debt limit here. And I think there's going to be an impetus to try and get a deal done here, hopefully in the next 6 weeks. And it's going to be a very interesting dance to watch, as you say.
And you mentioned permitting reform. That's a priority for both Democrats and Republicans, or mostly Republicans, or?
No, it's hard to cite, offshore wind. It's hard to cite, solar on Bureau of Land Management property, government property. Citing anything on government property, including offshore, takes a decade. If you're trying to cut carbon emissions as quickly as you can, that's a problem. So everybody has the same incentive, whether you want to build a natural gas pipeline or you want to build, a solar array or you want to build offshore wind, streamlining the environmental review process, improving our electrical transmission capability. All those things are things that I think both parties can come to agreement on. The issue is, can they do so in a way that both Senate Republicans and House Republicans can agree to the final product. The House passed its bill, H.R. 1, a couple of weeks ago. It's not acceptable. It doesn't have the votes in the Senate. It's not acceptable to the administration. So it's probably not the starting vehicle for Senate negotiations. I think Senators Capito and Barrasso are going to release a bill at the end of this month. Senator Carper and Senator Manchin, the two chairs on the Environment Committee and Energy and Natural Resources Committee, stand ready to work with them. Senator Manchin had his bill last fall. So there's a lot of work going on in the Senate. The question is, you guys will all remember on this phone call, we got an immigration deal in the Senate, I think in 2015, 2014, that had 67, 68 votes in the Senate, and the House refused to take it up. We could get a significant bipartisan agreement here on permitting reform, and the House could thumb its nose at it because it's not enough for House members. Mm-hmm. So, that's going to be the trick here, right? Like, if you look at major legislation in the last Congress, two of the three major bills, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment Job Act, the House basically swallowed the whole Senate bill. And, I don't think anybody imagines that happening in this Congress. How do you navigate what is a very tight window between the two bodies, especially between, frankly, Senate Republicans and House Republicans, remains to be seen.
And the Biden administration seems to be gearing up on the regulatory front. What is going on there? They are not. They are getting busy.
Yeah, last 10 days we have seen three major the electric vehicle rule, the CAFE rule that came out yesterday with the EPA administrator making the announcement, the Good Neighbor rule, the electric transmission pollution reduction rule that EPA released about 10 days ago. And then in between those two was another clean air rule regulating the chemical sector. And the interesting thing about these rules was the reality that they're all, first of all, there was very little engagement with stakeholders on them. Typically, when you're negotiating a change to, vehicle emission standards, you talk to the car industry. When you are negotiating clean air standards for the chemical sector, you spend a lot of time talking to the chemical sector. These rules were really pushed out expeditiously without a lot of stakeholder input. And I think the administration is very conscious of just getting something out there, and they'll fix it when they finalize it in the next year. But they want to have all of these rules finalized before next May, when if the president were not to win re-election, the next president would be able to claw back those rules if they hadn't been finalized by then, or Congress would be able to review them under the Congressional Review Act and overturn them and have the new president sign them, the rule that would be eliminating that rule. So you have a situation where the administration wants to get, there's probably 10 to 12 major environmental and other related proposals out there that collectively cost probably, I'm guessing, in terms of the different sectors impacted, over $100 billion. And we're effectively remaking the economy in real time as we write these rules for a variety of different sectors. And the problem with it is, we just passed these bills, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act in the last Congress, basically trying to onshore EV battery production and electric vehicle production, onshore the semiconductor industry, and fix our infrastructure holistically so that we can onshore more manufacturing in the United States and be less reliant on China. At the same time, we're spending all this money to help companies onshore. EPA is regulating and basically making us more stringent from a standards perspective than Europe. So you are, on the one hand, trying to onshore from a regulatory perspective, encouraging offshoring. In fact, what I'm hearing from some of my industry clients is it's much easier to site in the EU than it will be to deal with the U.S. regulatory environment in a couple of years.
That's quite a statement.
That is quite a statement. And it doesn't feel
it's
like...
not like, yeah, you didn't say, I mean, it's not like you said some freewheeling crazy country.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, and, we're in a situation here where the administration needs a holistic policy that doesn't ignore environmental protection, but we've always said as Democrats that the economy and the environment can work together, and we can set standards in a way that industry can meet them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not where these rules are right now. These rules are pretty extreme, and that's going to need to get fixed if we're going to try to achieve our goal of onshoring these critical industries.
And so before they roll these out, Rich, they give our listeners a little bit of what it's like in the back channels. Clearly, they have to run them by the White House, and
sure.
and I'm sure the Biden administration officials in the Commerce Department were not too excited about these rollouts. Was there a battle probably that going on behind the scene, or is it just what you said, like, we may be going too far, but we got to get these out now because we have to get them finalized in a year. We'll listen to you. We'll get your input, but we got to get these out now. We can't wait. We got to get this moving. Is that?
I mean, look, I don't know. I'm not privy to what the political calculus is in the White House on these things, but look, we're in a time where Democrats are watching the other team engage in a circular firing squad, right? We've got the former president who's been indicted once. It looks like there are others coming. He's still up by 20 points in the polls. I mean, I can see a situation where they're looking at me going, Rich, that's very nice. You're actually factually correct, but we don't think anybody's going to be focusing on our regulations. November of 2024, we think, the fact that there's a clown car and a circus going on will be what everybody cares about, and we will look totally rational in comparison to that.
Well, that's probably very true. However, to your earlier point, at the end of the day, they want to get them right so that we do, bring those things on shore. You would think.
Well, that is the point at the end of the day, right? There is this called actual
getting the actual policy correct. Yeah, I mean, this is all politics and stuff, but it's there's been quite a few announcements. And so what? When do they have to have it finalized by? Where if they had a new president, the new president or the new Congress cannot easily meddle with it.
It's right around Memorial Day of 2024.
Okay.
So that's why you see this, like, as I describe it, the regulatory.
Yep.
I mean, it's literally funny when you talk to staff over there, their heads are literally spinning about if this is Tuesday, it must be an air rule.
Yeah. Yeah, it's well, as you were describing it, it reminded me of Charlie Wilson's War, where they were meeting in Israel over the trying to get the weapons, and he said, "Well, don't worry about that. We'll be fine because as we're trying to get these weapons, they'll be focused on Charlie's troubles from a Vegas party, and you could park an aircraft carrier over there, and they won't notice."
Exactly. There's a serious point to this, though, right? Like, I don't need to tell you that the approval ratings just of government today, the ability of government to meet the needs of the American public are very low. And this kind of stuff where the Democrats just look like, the opposite side of the spectrum from the Trump guys who were too far right. These guys are too far left. None of this is helpful. I'm not suggesting that the only way to go is the center. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to convince the public that what you're doing is going to make a difference in their daily lives. And it's great that, they're going to get more electric vehicles, but if they can't afford to buy one because they're too expensive, because you put domestic content requirements in that can't be met in the next 5 years, and therefore none of those cars are eligible for the tax credit that you need to buy the car. And on top of that, you're forcing people to move to electric vehicles so quickly that they're very expensive to manufacture, as opposed to if you gave it a few more years, they'd be more affordable. These are the things that matter to the average person who makes less than $100,000 a year. And sometimes I think we as Democrats have forgotten, those people matter here, and we need to be taking care of those people. It's not just the people who drive 2 Teslas in the suburbs.
Well, and speaking of politics, I'm not expecting you to comment that much, but there's been Senator Feinstein recently this week calls on her to step down, step aside. How is that being received in Washington circles? Is it just?
I mean, these are always tough situations. I've known Senator Feinstein for 30 years. She is a great lawmaker. It's very hard. I think one of the hardest things to do in an act is to figure out when to leave the stage.
When to leave stage. Very few people do it at the top of their game. Very, very few people pull off what Jerry Seinfeld pulled off and, leave it the number one show.
And I don't think there's anything you can do to you can't mandate it. But I do think this will get resolved in the right way over the next period of weeks. And I also don't terribly appreciate a bunch of activists who have never run for office telling somebody who served her entire life in public service, get off the stage. I don't think that's necessarily terribly helpful. And I don't respect a lot of the people taking that line right now. I firmly understand that we want to get judges confirmed. But, at the same time, we all need a little grace.
I would agree. What and how is everything else in D.C.? What else is going? How are things at Holland Knight?
We're doing good.
Yep.
We're doing a lot of grant and loan funding with DOE and the Department of Defense under the Inflation Adjustment Reduction Act. Sorry. Business is real good. If there's a recession, lying, hiding around the corner, we haven't seen it yet. And knock wood, we're hoping we won't.
Yeah, no, it's been a busy time in the government sector. And well, Rich, always great to have you on. We appreciate the quick update. And we will have you back soon. If anything comes up and you want to jump on, please let me know. For our listeners out there, remember you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can sign up for our email at thepoliticallife.net. Comes out every week. And we hope you enjoyed the show. And we will see you next Friday.